Live from New Orleans, the Osceola. We're about 24 hours out from a pretty big game for the Florida State football team against LSU here. Kurt Weiler here with Jerry Coots, publisher, Bob Ferrante, managing editor of the Osceola. Guys, what's the vibe? I know you just got here, Bob. You were the late arriver of the bunch. Couldn't get over yesterday. What's been the vibe here, Jerry, that you've seen in your first bit of time here?
Well, first thing was seeing the team, pull up right across the street from us here at the Marriott Hotel. That was really exciting. They had a big crowd of fans there to greet them. I think you got some video and put it up, didn't you?
Well, yeah, it's on my Twitter. Yes, the team. We just happened to be here getting ready to do this shot, and they arrived in their buses. We got some video of them walking into the lobby. A group of Florida State fans seemed to know. I'd been told they were when and where they're going to be arriving. So yeah, it was. I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns surrounding this game. It's going to be really fascinating. Bob, when you look at what are the if there's one thing you had to pick that is a key for Florida State in this game.
I'm really curious about the intangible of an in-game adjustment from the Florida State coaching staff. I think what they have to do is really adapt on the fly. This feels like a game where you've done so much research. You've done the deep dive into this coordinator, that coordinator, who was where in previous years, what Brian Kelly does historically. Now, on the fly, you have to say to the kids, settle down. Here's what we saw. Here's how we're going to adjust. Just relax. It's loud. It's a big dome. You've never been in a dome before. But we can do this. I think it's more about the mental mindset and management within the game.
Yeah, it's been impressive all the work Florida State's had to do with an almost entirely new LSU coaching staff that came from a few different places, with a number of players that are new to that team added through the portal. I mean, there's been a lot of turnover on the coaching staff and on the roster, and it's been a lot to prepare for. And I think Florida State will find out early kind of what exactly they pulled from all those other areas of the game. Jerry, what are you looking at?
Well, exactly that. I mean, poise under pressure. It starts with the coaching staff. It starts with the coaching staff. They've got spotters in the box. They'll be up there, the analysts will be up there watching to see if LSU's and the tendencies they think they'll be in, and conveying that message down to the coaches on the field. And you'll see Alex Adkins up there with a chalkboard on the sidelines trying to draw up the what actually that LSU defensive front is doing as the game progresses. And you got to keep your poise as a coaching staff, and then also the players themselves. When things aren't going exactly the way that they scripted it at practice, they've just got to keep their head and stay poised.
I'm interested. I mean, we got the tomahawk chop going by now. Florida State, we should say. The fan base representing well out here in New Orleans. I've been very impressed with the number of Florida State fans I've seen out here. I'm interested to see what the split in that stadium is tomorrow. You're only about an hour from Baton Rouge in LSU Stadium. This is, yeah.
Live YouTube doesn't get any better than
this. But I'm interested to see what the split in that stadium is. I don't think it's going to be 50-50, but how close to 50-50 is it? There is a big group of Florida State fans that I've seen here. We know they sold that allotment of tickets, and they have I'm interested how the influence that can have on the atmosphere.
I think some people don't subscribe to the theory of momentum in college athletics. I do in a game like this early in the season. Young guys haven't played together a whole lot just yet, especially on the LSU side. How do you handle the emotion of what's going on within the building? A lot of transfers on the LSU side. Their first true game on a field together. But I think the Florida State fans, when they see positive plays for Florida State, they're going to go crazy. You're going to hear the war chant going. So I think we will see the swing back and forth. It could be a game where we'll truly see an ebb and a flow where, you're going to have moments where it's not looking good for Florida State. It's looking great for LSU. And that's going to swing back and forth throughout the game. So that's, again, when I come back to composure, the team that is maybe the most composed throughout, and that's really, really hard for young athletes to do. But if you can do it, I think you're going to win on Sunday night.
So I think Mark Salva made a very interesting point in his analysis, pregame analysis. That works both ways. So if you get the momentum going, don't relax and sit on it. You got to put your foot on their throat and just work harder. Use it as an incentive, a motivation to keep pushing farther. So yes, momentum will be a big, in the little story I did about the LSU history, In the 9-game history, 6 of the games were determined by a major difference in turnovers. The team that won the turnover battle won the game, which is true in most games, but it certainly has been true in this LSU-FSU series.
But yeah, it is true in most games, not always as drastic. And I mean, I think when you look at Jordan Travis and his recent track record, I mean, say what you will about Jordan Travis, I think he's undeniably grown as a passer. I think I was looking at the numbers this week. I think in his last 7 games, he only has 1 interception. I think he has been on a pretty impressive run of taking care of the ball. It bears mentioning. He's going to be facing a tough defensive line. We'll see. We have some LSU fans here off to the side as well. They need to make their voice heard. We're talking too much about FSU for their liking. But I mean, that defensive line for LSU is very good. I mean, is it? We'll see if it's best in the country, but it is loaded with guys who we think are going to be playing on Sundays. So how can that offensive line? What's the state of offensive line? We have some questions there about who's available, unavailable, and we'll see what they're able to do to give Florida State time.
I think it's a big strength versus perceived weakness, maybe for both teams. Florida State's defensive front, a strength. LSU's offensive line, a perceived weakness. Florida State's offensive line, a perceived question mark. Maybe not a weakness, but at least a question mark going in. Who will be available? Who will the center be? We saw Florida State go with their number 4 center against Duquesne out of necessity. That can work out against Duquesne, against LSU and those potential draft picks. It will not likely do well if you don't have good cohesion and good communication, and that's tough in a tough environment where you can't communicate as easily. Lots of question marks.
All right, Bob, you just got here. As you walk around, you'll see a lot of Florida State fans. They're everywhere. And I think maybe it's because, like on Bourbon Street, that's sort of a tourist area, and so the Florida State fans are flocking there. Maybe the LSU fans are going to make it a day trip over and back.
I think that's quite possible, yeah.
But there's a lot of dadgum Seminoles out there, and a lot of things now to do before you go to bed tonight. You need to go out there and eat some of that good food, have a cold one. A lot of fun here in New Orleans.
I suggested to some fans on the message board, go ahead and make it a 3-day weekend. You know, just little tongue-in-cheek comment. Somebody said, how about a 4-day weekend? How about a 5-day weekend? Let's just.
I'm not sure there are enough days for a weekend in New Orleans.
Come on, do it right in New Orleans.
I mean, ain't that the truth? Yeah, we will have plenty of coverage. It'll be fascinating. I mean, there's really so many things, so many unknowns about this game for both teams. I think LSU's wide receiver. We talked about the defensive line. The wide receiver is going to be a real challenge as well for that secondary. Yeah, so they're still going. We know. But yeah, I mean, what is the health of Florida State's secondary? Because we know Maureen Cooper didn't play last week. Getting him back, having him available would be a big deal.
It's a big difference, and not to knock Jarian Jones, but there is a drop-off between what Amarian Cooper gives you. Yes, he's younger. Yes, he's a second-year player, but you feel like he is evolving into a lockdown-type corner, somebody who can physically match up well against a bigger wide receiver. LSU's got some bigger wide receivers. Jarian Jones, yes, he had that late hit that was a learning lesson from him, because you saw immediately there was Adam Fuller, there was Mike Norvell right up in him to correct him. But yeah, we've seen the highs from Jarian, we've seen the lows from Jarian. You need a game like this with a little bit more mental focus and I think consistency, being prepared for what's going to come at you. I think that's a true matchup within the matchup that we'll be watching. Not just the lines where these games are truly won and lost, but the wide receiver, DB matchups, and truly on the FSU side too. Can these transfers step up in a big moment against a question mark of the LSU defense of their cornerbacks?
And along with that, I would say their linebackers. I think none of us expect Florida State to run for 400 yards in this game like they did last week. Florida State's not going to have 300-yard rushers. The LSU fan over there right before we started made it clear that they weren't going to have 400 yards. And I don't think any Florida State fans expects that. But how much success can they have? LSU's linebackers, I think, are a question mark, too. They didn't play especially well. If you look at the PFF grades from last year, I think that is a question. And if they're able to not break tackles even at the same rate, but just do anything close to what they did last week, and against a team playing its first game, while you're playing its second, that could be a big difference.
Yeah, it is. That's the one thing we haven't talked about is special teams. And special teams is also a huge factor in these games. Most close games are won by a special teams play, a momentum play. And so, what do y'all think about that?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think some fans kind of weren't thrilled with what they saw last week from a Florida State special team standpoint. I would advise on some of those things to not be worried from the Duquesne game. I'm not too worried about punt return because that punter was struggling to punt the ball, especially far. But I mean, we've seen Ryan Fitzgerald handle the moment well if he has to come up with a clutch kick. Syracuse last year, we've seen him not handle the moment well, missing a kick last year in Notre Dame. I think LSU has some similar questions. I don't think there is a surefire kicker advantage. On Mastromano, I think you feel good about it. I think you feel, but if it turns into a field position game, if it's low scoring, which I think we think it might be, I know that's the way you're leaning, Bob, then the field position game of punting becomes big. And how can Mastromano do? He did pretty well, and I mean, has gone quite a while without touchback.
Yeah, we've seen Mike Norvell does like to go for it on fourth down. I think he will take those calculated risks in a game like this, kind of feel out where is an opportunity, where I can convert on a 4th and 1. I just don't want to give the ball back to LSU yet. But when it is time to punt, when you have to punt, yeah, I mean, we feel like Alex Mastromano can flip that field and give your defense good working green behind it to protect. Yeah, I think there are some definite strengths within this Florida State special teams unit. There are still some question marks. I like what Micah Pittman has shown us in some practices in the return game. You just saw a glimpse as a fan. You just saw a few little pieces of those returns, and they weren't positive for you. But I would just say kind of wait it out and see what the full body of work evolves from him, because he is that electric type of guy with a little bit of grass around him to move.
I know I don't know about y'all. I've gone back and forth a decent amount on my thoughts on this one this week of how I think it's going to end. I think it'll be close one way or the other. I don't think either team's in a position where they're going to blow the other one out. So I guess I ask y'all as we're winding down here, Jerry, where's your head at?
My head is confused, bumfuzzled, but I think my heart. And I think a little bit of my gut tells me we can win this game. I got it as a 24-21 Florida State, mostly because, I want to speak victory. I want to think positive going into the game. And a ticket doesn't cost a nickel more, so you might as well be positive going in.
Bob?
I feel like a third-year program like Mike Norvell's, a third-year starting quarterback like Jordan Travis, there are a lot of intangible, confidence-related positives here. Not to knock Brian Kelly or anything that he's done in the offseason. Great coach. We know he's going to make this team better. But first-time starting quarterback in the program. Not Jaden Daniels has started for Arizona State against Florida State. We know what he can do. Will there be some turnovers that the moment might just be one where he throws a bad pick or a fumble, something. You don't know what it could be or when. There are some kind of intangible advantages that I think Florida State may have here. I view this as a low-scoring game, a 20-17 type, just because the two defensive lines are so good against the offensive lines from a matchup standpoint. I see Florida State winning it. Maybe that's more heart than truly having seen LSU to be able to visualize what they can offer. Curiously, I think the LSU writers are almost unanimously picking LSU. Yeah. And I would say that Florida State writers feel pretty confident about what they've seen through camp and Duquesne. So we're both kind of viewing it through our own personal lenses right now.
Yeah, it's I feel in a similar boat. I'm leaning Florida State close. That's how I've been. I think the having played a game, all the new pieces for LSU is a big deal for them. And like you said, I mean, I think if it comes down to turnovers, we can knock on wood. But if you look at recent track record, Jaden Daniels, he was at Arizona State. If he wasn't here, if it's him, and I think we all think it's him, not based on any intel, just that's how it seems like it's been going, even if Brian Kelly doesn't want to name a starter. You look at his season last year at Arizona State. He had 10 interceptions and 10 touchdowns. You can say his receiver group is upgraded, and it undeniably is. I mean, that might be the best receiver group in the SEC. But if he has control issues, does that make a difference? And to that, I would also say Jordan Travis has an improved receiving group to work with. So I think there are a lot of reasons to like Florida State. Anything in closing here as we wrap up?
It's going to be an exciting game, and it's one of those games. Historically, LSU has made a difference in the Florida State trajectory numerous times, and I see 79 was a great example. We come over here and we're trying to earn respect and get onto the national stage. It was Bobby Bowden's fourth season. We win that game in 79, come back in 80 and win again, and that was the shutout, 16-0, and that was it. That was the trajectory for Bowden's program. It was interesting. After the 79 game, Bowden had come into that game thinking he may take the LSU job at the end of the year. And he thought, well, if I can beat LSU at LSU, then I can win at Florida State. And he wound up turning down the LSU job after that 79 win. This could be that kind of a game that sets the trajectory for Mike Norvell or for Brian Kelly. And so we keep saying it's kind of an epic game. It's early in the season, but it's very important.
Yeah, and you wrote a great story on the Osceola. People should read on that this week, to be sure. Plenty of other great coverage. Bob caught up with David Johnson, a bit of a homecoming this week for FSU's running back coach. Tons of great content throughout the week. We'll have tons of great content as well for tomorrow's game. 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on ABC from the Caesar Superdome. Florida State should be well represented in the crowd, and we'll see if they're well represented on the field. It's a big moment for them. We appreciate you watching.